Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and NPs of all ages, you are most welcome along to the infamous, the incorrigible, the unbelievably not named until about 5 minutes ago. This is Brian's Mind Palace. I'm Brian, and with me today we have Jonathan. Hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Do you like my palace?
I do. I like what you've done with it. I have to say, very brave colours. I
It's
like it.
made mostly of the house that I was already living in, and if you are only watching any videos on this channel, shut up. This is all new and different. What are we doing exactly? No one knows except for me, and I'm going to tell you right now. Jonathan, have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons?
I currently am in a campaign as we speak, Brian.
You big fucking nerds, are us.
Mm.
For people who don't know what Dungeons and Dragons is, it is a tabletop role-playing game. We currently don't have a table. We're both wearing our tops, but my God, are we going to play a game? I want you, Jonathan, to show the audience what you have that we will be using to tell a story with today.
Okay, so you want me? So I do have a character. If you want to throw it in there, to perhaps spark your imagination, if that helps. I've gone for something. I've gone for something in the. So I've obviously we're talking about D&D, something fantastical, something otherworldly, something like a bit of an adventure. So I've gone for a character that has absolutely never experienced that in his fucking life. My character is called Dan Morton. Morton, in case you're wondering. And he is just another generic, faceless IT guy in an office that has way too many people in it, and everything around him is grey and drab. There's a dress code. He works 9 to 5, but he's on shift as well. His life basically rotates around what his line manager asks of him to do. And yes, he has to work extra hours. Yes, he has to contact the team in different time zones. And he's overall just quite a dull guy. Generic male unit is Dan Morton. And really, the man could just do with a bit of excitement in his life. But I'm actually not sure how he'd deal with that, because it doesn't really match with his KPIs.
I just love that. I want that to be somebody's wrestling gimmick. Here is the generic male unit. I don't think that's PG. What we are doing, for those of you completely lost among the reeds, is we're doing a bit of improv storytelling. Jonathan had to think about what type of element he would like to bring to the story. He has brought us Dan Morton, ICT specialist, yes man extraordinaire, dull as fuck, but my God, does he have a generic male unit?
Well, no one's seen it, but let's just take his word for it, yeah.
There may be some form, I believe it's a dodecahedron. There might be a piece of plastic in your vicinity there, Jonathan, with numbers on it.
Yes, correct, yes.
That is what we refer to as a D20. It has 20 sides on it. The number 1 being the lowest, which is very, very, very bad in terms of D&D. But we're not playing D&D. This is Brian's Mind Palace. As we tell this story together, I'll be asking Jonathan to roll for intensity. Whether it be emotional, situational, dialogue, or otherwise, to guide the story. And to the dice we pray we have a lovely story for you today. Dan Morton wakes up on Monday morning. Jonathan, can you please roll an intensity check, please?
Well, it's a Monday now, so I hope it's quite standard. It's a 5.
Dan hits his alarm in perfect time, and his day begins as it always does, with a lovely, dry piece of toast. Is Dan a tea or coffee man, Jonathan?
He is neither, Brian. He is a fruit juice man.
Wow. Man after my own
Would
calorific
you like me to
intake.
roll for the fruit juice?
Oh, if you're feeling like you want to know, you tell me exactly how intense this fruit juice is.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Right, I'm rolling for the fruit juice. It's a 6. He loves a bit of cranberry juice, Brian.
Okay. Um,
Great for the kidneys.
Dan, it's Monday morning. He had a wild weekend of playing checkers and doing crosswords, so he's feeling just a little bit worn out. So I want you to keep in mind, and I will do also, that Dan has not only drank his cranberry juice, he has put one in his bag to bring to work with him, possibly for use for later.
That's my inventory is a bottle of cranberry juice, yeah?
Yes, so far.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Dan goes about his morning, no flaws, no problems. There is not a bother on Dan ever. As Dan is ready to leave and head to work, would you please make another intensity roll for me?
Certainly. Another 6.
It's a perfectly day. Dan doesn't have an eventful commute. He's able to walk to work very calmly, very relaxed, through a very typical suburban park. You'll see empty playgrounds and just the buzz at the commute. People dropping kids off to school and children just gently cycling their bikes. Not a problem to be had for Dan. He has no problems. He himself is not a problem. He's a yes man. He does what's asked of him with not a single bother. Dan, reaching the end of the park, he looks left, looks right. He's about to cross the road. Could you make an intensity roll for me, please?
I will. Number 5, Brian.
Dan sees the local school pickup bus just trundle along by. He sees kids, some with smiling faces, some with tired faces, and he clocks one of his neighbours, the kid, just very gently, little wave to Dan, a little wave back. He goes on his day, trundling along, not a bother to him, almost unnervingly so. Not a single bother in Dan's head, not a single thought in Dan's head. He's just cruising. Has he achieved some form of nirvana? We may find out. Would Dan be a gentleman who enjoys music or a podcast, Jonathan? How does Dan feel to you?
He's not a great. He doesn't listen to music. It kind of distracts him from what he's doing. But he does listen to a couple of podcasts, and that all of them are like self-improvement and interviews with like really kind of interesting people that are they're people to aspire to. Um, a lot of them come up with his LinkedIn recommendations.
Would you make an intensity roll for me?
Very well. A 12.
This is the part of Dan's day that he would almost tell you is interesting. Dan is a practical man. He wouldn't pay for a premium subscription to any type of streaming service, so he has to listen to the ads. And it's his favorite bit of every podcast because he buys every single ad he hears. And this ad is for a classic collection of old phone books. Dan places an order straight away using the promo Do What I Tell You. And Dan, by the end of this day, and if he makes it home, will have a 2004 Yellow Pages. Did they have a Yellow Pages in 2004?
Did you know?
The joy of storytelling. Dan Dan finally makes it to work, having been absolutely thrilled by his purchase of a phone book. He reaches into his bag to find his staff ID to gain access to this towering behemoth of a building, floor upon floor of glass and concrete and steel. Corporate perfection is what Dan sees before him, and he doesn't have a single opinion or thought about it. All he does is reach into his bag to try and find his badge. And can you please make an intensity roll for me?
Well, 13.
He can't find his badge. It's not there. He has been so absent-minded through his entire commute, living so automatically and without any interesting things to guide him on his way. He now stands in front of his work, unable to gain access to the building. Jonathan, I've been doing a lot of talking.
Hmm.
How do you feel Dan would progress? Would he go home and be late for work? Or would he try to enter the building without his security pass?
That's a very good question. I would suspect, well, obviously it depends on what time he is, but I think Dan is typically 15 minutes early anyway. So seeing that his commute is actually quite convenient, I think he might retrace his steps and see did he drop his badge anywhere in perhaps in between the park and his place of work. Because he did get distracted by that ad about the phone books, so could very well have displaced it
Just
there, you know?
thrilling,
Yeah.
thrilling purchase by Dan. Oh my God. Excuse me. A little bit of extra expenditure available for Dan. It pays to be a corporate slave.
Hmm.
So you're heading back to the park? You'd
Yeah,
like Dan to
I'm
go
gonna
back to the
retrace my
park?
steps and see if Dan misplaced his swipe there.
And you make the dice do the roly thing
Okay,
to see how he does so.
very good. Okay,
Test
9.
9. Focused without being hurried. Knowing where he needs to be. Single minded. Dan traces his steps back to the park. He's 15 minutes early. It's taken him 5 minutes to walk there. He has 5 minutes to search, to look around. Where would Dan look? Where does he think his badge would be? And rather than an intensity check, we're going to
Hmm.
use this dice. If you get over a 10, you'll find the badge. If you get below a 10, he will not find the badge.
Okay, okay. I am going to roll. It's a 14, so it's
Finds the
14.
badge.
Hmm.
Finds the badge in time at 14, being slightly more intense. Dan hurries back across the road and not doing his due diligence, not paying attention to what's happening on the road. A car screeks, horn, bah, 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 bah. Slightly shaken, a little bit out of breath, catching himself, realizing, oh my God, I could be on time for work. Not late, but exactly on time as he needs to be, which is just not okay for Dan. He gets in the door of his work, open aired, gleaming, naturally lit atrium, if you will. Where else would you enter but the atrium?
Mhm.
Now, he's unassuming. Nobody pays him much attention, but in himself, now, riled, shaken, starting to be almost out of sorts, reaching the lift, standing there, ready to push the buttons numbered 1 to 45. This is a huge, massive corporate behemoth of a building. Money comes and money goes, and Dan is always there. Dan is always working, and Dan selects his floor, number 13. Unlucky for some. And in some buildings, you wouldn't even have the number 13. But as Dan pushes the button to go to work to be exactly on time, would you be so kind as to make an intensity roll for me?
Certainly. Here we go. A 9.
Elevated, but not interested. He hits the button. The door opens. He stands in the lift. And would you roll once more for me?
Hey. 10.
Picking up pace now.
Mm-hmm.
Doors aren't closing as quick as he would like, and the hand is placed in between the doors. A colleague. A colleague. If this is Dan, let's call her Demi. Demi. Demi, like almost. Just like Dan. Unassuming. Demi, like Dan. Fairly undescript, well mannered, well dressed, polite. Would Dan make a conversation or any notice to a colleague entering a lift?
Um, oh, he probably the usual kind of like, nod, smile, morning, and then just leave it like that.
Morning, morning.
Hey.
Demi catches a glimpse. Dan, of all peoples, almost to her eyes looking not completely well ironed and not completely groomed and to right angled perfection that he would be. She spots inside his bag his cranberry juice. Thinks nothing of it. Dan arrives on the 13th floor. On the 13th day of what would be the 13th month, January. See what I did there?
But
Cold, cold day, an unassuming day, a Monday morning in January. Not as exciting a day as we were hoping to have, but perfect for Dan. He has no time but to be exactly where he needs to be. And some would say the most perfect place for him, at his desk. Just on time to log in, sign in, clock in. We'll be using the dice to determine whether Dan will be able to log in exactly on time. Same rules apply. Above a 10, successful. Below a 10.
all right. Let's see. This is gonna be make or break, I think. 17, Brian. Never in fucking doubt.
On time. Perfection. 0900. On time. Dolly Parton would be so proud. Dan sits at his desk, arranges himself, sits down, gets any morning briefs and memos or any emails. An email he doesn't recognize. No name he's aware of, and it just says HR urgent meeting at 9:05. Dan clicks the email. It just gives very stark, simple, direct, binary message. 45th floor, 9:05. Dan now has 5 minutes to make it to his meeting. He has arrived exactly on time. He's unable to do any of his usual morning tasks. Is urgent from HR. So would Dan attempt to make a start of his work, inform anyone of this urgent meeting that was not in his itinerary, or would he just go straight to the meeting?
I think he'd go straight to the meeting. He wouldn't mess around with deadlines, especially with HR. So I think he'd, and in fairness, he's not easy. He doesn't have anyone else on his team, so he'll just kind of briskly tidy away the chair, lock the screen, all that jazz, and just head straight back to the elevator.
Would you please make an intensity check?
Certainly. 4.
Bordering on bored. HR want to talk to me? It just doesn't think. He goes willingly. Not slowly, but not quickly. Not even comfortably. Moving slower than you would expect him to. Walking past other cubicles, lined up neatly. Soft carpet underfoot. Nothing rushing, nothing worrying. He reaches for the 45th button on the lift. Would you be able to make a success or fail roll? Same rules apply.
Certainly.
10. Above 10. Successful. Below 10. Failure.
12.
He's cutting it close.
Yeah.
He's
He was a bit
cutting it
complacent there. Yeah.
very, very, very close. Probably thinking about his phone books.
Hmm.
Gets on the lift. In time. The lift is where it needs to be. As everything needs to be for that. And he heads up to the 45th floor. Never been to the 45th floor before. Never knew of anything that went on this floor. Why would he? He goes to his floor, does his work exactly on time. He arrives on the 45th floor. It is a barren, open, empty office space, furnished with a desk at the far end of the room. Dan, unassuming, undesiring, nearly inhuman, walks towards this single desk at the far end of the room. A colleague he can only assume is the HR representative, of which he is there to meet. Could you make an intensity check for me, please?
Certainly. 2.
Sign here. Dan,
I'm
sign.
I'm I'm I'm, I'm sorry. Um, sign what?
Identification confirmation is required for all meetings in human resources. Please sign your name and present your badge.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, Dan will do exactly that.
Does he have his badge?
It
Can you roll?
Oh, you sneaky little fucker. Very nice, very evil. 18.
He
It's around his neck, Brian.
absolute
It's
like
around his neck.
almost Wild West style. A moment in time for Dan. Whips it out. Whoosh. Badge confirmed. Name signed. Please wait here. Standing now across from a singular colleague in an empty room at a single desk. Where do Dan's eyes go to?
The floor. The floor, the roof, the walls, anything but the colleague or where this could possibly be going.
Can you make an intensity check for me, please?
Certainly. 20.
He is left alone, Jonathan. Dan is left alone with another human being. There is no rhythmic motion of a lift. There is an undefined reason for this meeting. Dan is now gonna have to engage in his least favorite human activity of small talk with a stranger. What does he say?
Um, Sorry, but do you know what this is about?
You received correspondence that were sent to you. You agreed to the terms of these correspondence. You have presented yourself exactly on time in a manner in which that I can determine as acceptable. Are you telling me you don't know what you're doing here?
No, I saw the email and said I should be here like by five past nine, and I got here by 5 past 9, and I just want to know what this is all about.
You're agreeable to the terms. You've been asked to wait. Are you happy to continue to engage in the terms that have been laid in front of you?
In terms of waiting, I've no problem waiting. I just like to know information. That's all.
You've been given a direct instruction. You are happy to proceed with that instruction. And yet, can you make an intensity roll for me?
3.
There is nothing more you need to know. You are doing exactly as asked in a manner that is acceptable.
All right then. I'll keep waiting then, I suppose.
If you are so inclined to try and engage yourself beyond what I'm assuming is a rising boredom, I would like to offer this view as penance for your waiting. You may choose any side of this room in which you would like to peruse the vista.
Is there a side that you recommend the most? I presume you work here in HR.
We both work exactly where we work in a manner in which is determined acceptable by our employers. You have agreed to the terms of this meeting, and I am engaging in what I can only discuss as friendly. I believe it's called banter.
Well, I suppose that does technically define as banter, but I think I'll just look over it here then. Is that nice? Is there anything nice over that side?
My opinion about the niceness of this conversation is not a matter of interest to our employer's direct instructions. I have gone beyond the parameters of my role in this interaction, by which you have now chosen to view the vista. I hope you find it some way engaging before we continue with the assigned task?
So do I. Yeah. Hmm.
Walking over to the window after what was, quite frankly, a complete Shakespearean, character driven, powerful, and emotional, connecting dialogue with other worker. Can you roll an intensity check for what you may see out the window?
Yep. I see a 9.
Quite literally, 9 birds, geese, flying in an A. Eh, not a V. One of the geese seems to be caught in the middle of it all, flying perfectly in sync, seemingly out of formation, and yet perfectly in the middle of it all, standing and viewing. You look at the geese, you hear a faint, "Ah." Does Dan have any feelings towards watching nature in front of him seemingly out of sequence?
I think he finds it mildly amusing.
After viewing bountiful vista, Dan turns around and notices that his other colleague is gone. What would Dan choose to do knowing he was told to wait here?
I think Dan would be Dan is confused as to why the coworker has gone. The terms of agreement was that, well, that he would wait there, but not necessarily that that person would wait there. So technically, he can't leave. So I think he probably try and look around to see if that person is around. Probably start facing the desk to see if that person's going to come back.
He walks back over to the desk.
Yeah.
Walking back over to the desk, looking down at the desk beside the paper where he signed his name without any question is another piece of paper written in what looks to be bold marker, a bright blue text with an almost comical sans font of 2 words and a symbol. Chase me, smiley face. Make a roll, much like a luck roll or a decision roll. If you roll above a 10,
Hmm.
Dan will take chase. If you roll below a 10, Dan will remain.
Okay. 2.
Standing compliant, viewing 2 pieces of paper in front of him. Dan, diligent employee, having signed his committed action to remaining in this room. His work remains. His task seemingly is being complete, but I would ask you to roll an intensity check to see how Dan feels about this.
A 3.
He is compliant. He is doing as he is told. He is exactly where he has been told to be. Exactly where he was told he should be. His work is ongoing. Emails, tickets, instructions piling up, but he was told to be here, so he will remain here. What would you know Dan to do in this moment?
Depends on how long he's been waiting. I think if we get to the 5 to 10 minute mark, I think he's getting a little bit edgy because there's things to be doing. Um,
Do
so
you
I
think
think by if we're getting to the 5 10 minute mark, I think he might start like looking around to see what's going on.
yeah. And you're standing looking at the desk. Behind you is the door that you entered in.
Hmm.
All around you is seemingly from behind you is a wall with a door. You came in there. Everything else around you is a complete panoramic glass view on the top floor of a big, conglomerated corporate building, ever standing, ever looming, and ever present, looking over the tiny little town that you were born in and raised in. 10 minutes pass. Entering now into 15 minutes. Dan seems to like his 15 minutes. Arrive 15 minutes early and leave 15 minutes later. It's a fair time. 5 minutes is too fast. 10 seems a little bit rushed, but 15 isn't a waste of time. That would be
Enough,
20
enough
minutes.
time, yeah.
20 minutes is a lot. He reaches 15 minutes. Can you roll an intensity to see how Dan is feeling, having stood here unoccupied, unengaged, and uninstructed for a full 15 minutes?
He has rolled a 9.
He feels no more intense than when he was walking absent mindedly to work, and absent mindedly he remains, at least in thought. It's now been 16 minutes. He's
Hmm.
chosen to stay, been unengaged by what seems to be the foolish, playful nature of his colleague, whom he doesn't even know their name. 16 minutes has passed. What would Dan do now?
I think he do what most people do if they're gonna leave, and he does the whole pat of the on the legs go right, and he's gonna turn and leave and try and go back to his desk.
Can you make an intensity roll for me?
A 5.
Dan has made an uninstructed decision. The same colleague now standing bolt upright in front of him, staring quizzically. I asked you to chase me. I instructed you to chase me. You were compliant in the terms of our meeting. You've been standing here for 16 minutes. How would Dan respond?
Uh, uh, okay, I'll be perfectly clear. I don't think the instructions were particularly clear. There was just a note that I assumed it wasn't for me.
Ah, Dan, Mr. Morton, you've assumed. You've assumed. Oh, goody, 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 good. It's nice to see you taking a little bit of initiative. So that means you now get to choose. You can either chase me or I can chase you. Can you roll a success? Roll. If it is above 10, Dan will chase. If it is below 10, Dan will be chased.
Never wanted to roll a one so much in my life. It's a 6.
I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes. In those 15 minutes, you can go anywhere in the grounds of this working building, and I'll chase you.
He is completely baffled. What are you talking about? What? Where am I going? What chase? What's happening? Who are you?
You've agreed to the terms of this meeting. You have signed your name and presented your identification. You are now compliant in the instructions that have been given to you. And now it's your turn to be chased by me. Looks at their watch. Beep boop, beep boop, beep. 15 minutes flash up and start to tick down. What would Dan do?
What is there a penalty? Is there a prize? Like I need more information. You can't just tell me to be chased and that's it.
The further you get away, the better chance you have of being successful.
At what? What do I win? What do I lose?
I'm I'm chasing you. And if I catch you, then you'll find out. If I don't catch you, then you win. The terms of which will be presented to you on completion of winning. You now have 14 minutes.
I get the feeling you're not with HR, are you?
As far as you're concerned, HR means hurry up. Hurry, run. Tick tock. If I catch you, then I will tell you exactly what you want to know. But you have not been compliant in the instructions in which you have signed your name and presented your badge to. You are to be chased, and this will be a very short chase. You are compliant in the instructions that have been provided to you, are you not?
I I guess I am. I'm just looking for additional information on the instructions.
You showed your own initiative by disobeying a direct incentive of which you are compliant by signing your name and presenting your identification. If you wish to remain in this room, you are perfectly entitled to do so, having shown your initiative twice. Now, you have 13 minutes. If you are looking for any more ideas or any other reasons, I would suggest you run.
Yeah. I would like to make an intensity roll, if that's all right.
As you wish.
An 11. Okay. I think Dan's gonna go. Oh, okay. Okay. Fine. All right. I see what's going on here. This is one of these middle management tricks, isn't it? Okay, fine. Maybe I didn't get the Singapore assignment done in exactly the right window. I was a few hours short. It happens. It's a time zone difference. But I'm not going to be running through hoops by someone who thinks they can just push me around. I have worked to the
Well,
bone every single day. No, no, you listen to me now. This is it. I've spent 20 minutes up here wasting time when I could have been productive and doing something that maybe would have earned me some sort of commendation. But no, I am not getting chased, and I'm not chasing you. I'm standing right here until I get some actual answers from whoever you are.
you are compliant in signing your name and presenting your identification. You have now shown three incidents of your own personal initiative, which goes in direct violation of company guidelines and the terms of your contract in which you are presented, of which you signed your name and were presented with identification. This will now be considered a formal warning. You have 10 minutes to
A
run.
formal warning for disobeying what? This is supposed to be a direct order, is it?
You are compliant in signing your name and presenting your identification to the terms of this meeting.
I really hope you could stop saying that.
I really hope you'd run.
From what? From you? Have you got a gun? Have you got a sword? What am I running from?
Reaching into their back pocket, they take out a notebook folded over. And you see disciplinary, receding, formal warning. I now present in my hand what you should understand as a formal, written warning, of which that if I were to sign my name and present it to you, you would then be docked half a day's pay.
This is absurd. For what? For not chasing you around the building?
I do believe the terms of our agreement is that you would be chased, but I'm quite happy to do so. And they run out of the room.
Not the Monday morning I wanted.
Would Dan follow?
It is ridiculous. It is silly. But he does need a perfect record. So yes, he's going to start giving chase.
Running out of the room and hanging a sharp left, our unnamed HR colleague is gleeful, bounding, almost hurried, but not running, walking, briskly and intensely. Can you roll for me? Every single roll, every single number on this dice will equal the amount of space that you are able to close. We are going to do 3 rounds of rolling. This person is 20 meters away from you.
Okay.
If you close the gap within 20 meters, you will have officially caught them and have been successful in the terms of agreement in which you have signed your name and presented your identification. If you fail these rolls and do not make up the number 20 within 3 rolls, it will be considered a failure of the terms of agreement of the contract in which you have signed your name and presented your identification. Jonathan, can you make the first roll, please?
First roll is a 13.
Perfect. Walking at equal but measured pace, not wanting to close the gap entirely, compliant yet unbridledly frustrated for Dan. He closes the gap. There's space, not fully that he would be able to reach out and achieve the terms of agreement in which he signed his name and presented his identification.
Okay.
Can you make a second roll, please?
Second roll, a 6.
By definition, exactly what you would need to only have to make one more roll. Correct?
Yes,
But we've been playing a little game of success or failure in this story, haven't we?
we have.
You've got 19! 19! You couldn't have scored any better. Right as Dan is reaching out to playfully tag his colleague, can you make a success roll for me? If you roll above a 10, you will be successful. If you roll below a 10, you will fail.
Okay. All right then. $16.
Successful.
Mm-hmm.
Almost. But quite literally, mathematically. Perfect. Provided 3 opportunities to do so, Dan is successful in his task, of which he has signed his name and presented his identification. His colleague turns and says, "You have done it. Congratulations, you have now completed employee engagement level 1. Please return to your desk to continue the rest of your day. The time spent during employee training level 1 will be added to your clock. You will not have missed any time for your for your participation in this task, and I thank you so much for your compliance, and I eagerly await your attendance for level 2.
It was middle managed all along. Right, okay. Oh, God. Every now and then they do something like this and it just throws me off my day.
Dan, sitting back at his desk,
Mm-hmm.
continues his day as normal, free, able, willing. Can you make a final success roll for me? Of which I will tell you how it affects Dan's day if you are
At
successful.
15, Brian.
Very successful.
Hmm.
Dan completes all his tasks flawlessly without any effort due to the lack of his usually perfectly metered out day. He has extra time on his clock, usually being able to leave 4 o'clock every day, 5 o'clock every day, 9 to 5, Dolly Parton's famous line.
Mm-hmm.
He now has the opportunity to leave early. He's completed his task, of which he has now a surplus of time clocked. Having had the type of day he has had, would Dan choose to keep his hours to use at a later date? Or would he use them instantly and leave seemingly an hour early at 4 o'clock?
Well, I think Dan would probably be aware that he is allowed to leave at 4 o'clock if required. And there is a phone book waiting for him at home, and he is very excited about that. So I think he's going to clock off here and put us out and inform whatever people are connected that he will be back in at 9 a.m. tomorrow exactly, and he's going to head home and giddily look forward to his phone book.
Walking out the door, Dan, quite happily, almost, you would nearly even consider him walking at over half pace to get out the door. And Demi just pops her head up and goes, "Oh, off early, Dan. See you tomorrow."
Yeah, see you tomorrow.
Dan hits the button for the ground floor, walks unassumingly through the foyer, back to the park. back home and you make a final success roll for our story today.
Okay. A 7.
Dan reaches in his bag to get his keys, to open his door, and he sees the extra juice carton has burst open within his bag, and while searching for his keys and adding extra friction and physicality to his rummaging, he finds a single drop of cranberry juice lands on the phone book placed on his mat.
I really do despise Mondays.
Thank you so much for everyone who has joined us on what I can only say is the weirdest thing that I've ever been a part of, and by right, probably the best. I hope you enjoyed it. Please tell me what you think Dan should or shouldn't have done, and what do you think level 2 holds for him? Jonathan, do you have anything you wish to add, anything you would like to say, or even in Dan's own voice? Speak now, and we will close the doors of Brian's Mind Palace for this episode. The floor is yours.
Alright, so he gets the phone book. Dan's gonna slightly dab a bit of tissue and try and get that drop of cranberry juice off, but it's not coming off, and he goes, oh well, at least it's on an old advertisement for some clothing brand I'm not aware of.
I am going to give Dan an out, and you can make a roll.
Okay.
You can make a success roll to see.
Okay. He's rolled a 14.
There is a plastic sheet covering the phone book.
So as he's preparing his ready meal for his dinner, and he's got his phone book, he's gonna obviously put on some gloves. He doesn't want to get a paper cut, and flicks over through, and he's going to go to the M's of the phone book, and he's going to look every Dan Morton that's in the area, just out of curiosity.
I mean, he's been living a wild day. He showed 3 incidents of someone would almost consider to be like free will. Who's to say he's not the only Dan Morton? But we might find that out in another episode.
I'm starting to like this Mind Palace. I might come back.
That'll do it. That'll do it for me and for all involved. I've done my outro.
Yeah. I've had my fun, and that's all that matters.